Like many little girls, I grew up obsessed with The Wizard of Oz. But it wasn't Dorothy I identified with. The character I wanted to be was the Wicked Witch of the West. Sure, she was scary, but she was a boss. She had a flying broom, an army of monkeys, and she knew how to make an entrance in a big poof of red smoke. And if you messed with her sister and took her ruby slippers, the witch was gonna fuck you up. The witch was big and powerful, and all eyes were on her. As a scrappy little first grader, a child so small that I was on a doctor-prescribed daily regimen of high-fat, high-protein milkshakes, that kind of big had great appeal. The Wicked Witch of the West wasn't just physically imposing. Yes, she had the pointy hat and the green face, but more importantly, she was in full control of her life. Unlike myself, who often felt like I was in the midst of a tornado. My mother and I lived in a studio apartment in Greenwich Village, which by day was vibrant with my mother's actor friends. And by night, it was filled with a string of gay guys she pretended to be engaged to for their work events. That part was wonderful. But in the quiet of the night, after my mother thought that I had fallen asleep, I heard her crying on the phone about how she wasn't sure she would make rent that month. My parents had recently divorced after a 5-year marriage. They met while living the breezy lives of 20-somethings in the 1960s and mistakenly mistook and naively mistook their love of Greenwich Village with the love of one another. According to my father, my mother became too focused on middle-class acquisitions like wall-to-wall carpeting. He said, "When I met your mother, she was a spunky little beatnik who could roll a joint with one hand. Now all she wants is a Hoover vacuum." My mother said they divorced because my father, all he ever wanted to do now was get high and stare at a fishbowl. We didn't have a carpet, but my mother had just landed a secretarial job at the New York Times, and I thought we were doing okay. Until the night that I heard her sobbing about our financial problems. I needed to do something. One of the things that I always loved about the Wicked Witch was that she made shit happen. Life wasn't happening to her, she was happening to it. As much as I wanted these type of superpowers, I knew I didn't have them, but still I needed to do something. I had to take action. So, I decided to have a sidewalk sale of anything in our apartment that I thought we could do without. I sold our teacups. We never really used them. I sold my mother's cinnamon color suede boots that she said pinched her toes, and I sold her copy of The Fear of Flying because she didn't really seem afraid of airplanes. We lived across the street from the Quad Cinema, a new concept in movie viewing in the 1970s where 4 different movies played all under the same roof. So it gave our apartment building on West 13th Street some good foot traffic, the perfect place for a first grader's sidewalk sale. A lanky woman in a safari print wrap dress approached. She cheerfully bought our sugar bowl, but pressed her lips together with pity when she saw that laid out on the blanket with the rest of my wares was my mother's diaphragm. When my mother returned from work that evening, I proudly handed her the $50 that she needed for rent. She reached and withdrew her hand 3 times before finally taking the cash and tucking it into her purse, telling me, "Honey, don't sell any more of our stuff." To make matters worse, my father was off in England pursuing his music career, promising that when he returned, it would be with a $1 million record contract. He wanted to do right by us, but the problem was he just didn't have much capacity for the mundane realities of life. His generous instincts didn't do us much good because he was always broke and high and gone. Earlier that year, he called me at 4 o'clock in the morning from London to tell me that he was sitting in a bathtub having a bad LSD trip. And then he cried, telling me about his sister's polio diagnosis 40 years earlier. I wanted to be a good daughter and comfort him, but on the other hand, I was like, I know you're really struggling, Daddy, but I'm 6 years old and I have show and tell tomorrow. And also, what's LSD? My father ended that middle of the night acid trip phone call, telling me, as he often did, that I was the only person in the world who truly understood him. The tenderness was thrilling, but also unsettling. It was a special connection that felt sacred, but at the same time counterfeit, because the truth was, at 6 years old, I really didn't understand his emotional complexity. But even then, I realized that if the only person my father thought understood him actually didn't, then he was completely alone in the world. Worse, it was my inability to understand him that had left him there. While my father was tripping in London, my mother was looking for sleepaway camp. All right. All right, so my father's not the only one tripping. While my father was tripping in London, my mother was looking for a sleepaway camp for me. New York City in July was like Dante's Inferno if Dante were a pimp, doused in whiskey and urine. My mother took on extra hours at work and found Camp St. Regis, located right on the curve of a small bay in East Hampton, with craggly white cabins and a beach that was all ours. My cabin was filled with 6-year-old little girls who all smelled like Coppertone and chapstick. The older girls wore halter tops and cork wedge sandals and squirted themselves with Love's Baby soft perfume before sneaking out to boys' camp in the middle of the night to tell knock-knock jokes and go to second base. This place was heaven. Camp was surprisingly affordable considering the fancy location and the fact that it had sailing lessons and horseback riding lessons and every other sport imaginable. But the best part of camp was that at the end of every summer, they did a big musical. And that year, the production was The Wizard of Oz, where I was sure to be cast as the witch. Among the other campers and counselors, I was known for running around straddling a broom and cackling and screeching lines from the movie, especially that I'd get them and their little dog, too. While other campers were experimenting with counselors' makeup, trying to be pretty, I would use an entire palette of green eyeshadow to cover my face. I wasn't interested in beauty. It was power I sought. And it worked. I would get daily requests to cackle from the other kids. Some of them looked terrified, most were amused, but all paying attention. Acting like a witch quickly became my thing. It was my place in the ecosystem of camp life, so I had no doubt that I would be cast as the role of the witch. But when the director, a 16-year-old basketball counselor, posted the cast list, it was like a house had been dropped on me. According to this freckle-faced point guard, I was better suited to play the mayor of Munchkinland. Right? It's an important role, he told me when I protested. The mayor was elected by the Munchkins because he was well respected. He's a pivotal character. Now, at 6 years old, I didn't know what pivotal meant, but I knew bullshit. Nobody gives a rat's ass about the mayor of Munchkinland because he doesn't do anything that matters. Does he live? Does he die? Do you remember what happens to the mayor? I don't, because nobody gives a flying monkey about the mayor of Munchkinland. He's completely irrelevant. You could write in a whole new scene where the entire Lollipop Guild busts out baby Uzis and assassinates the mayor, splattering his little guts everywhere. And the only way that this is going to affect the story at all is that now Dorothy would have to step over a dead little body on the yellow brick road because nobody cares about the mayor. Right? The witch, on the other hand, she's integral to the plot. Without the witch, there is no story. There's no conflict. Nothing matters without her. The director explained that I was too small to play the witch. I was a good 1.5 feet shorter than Dorothy, and he said that it would be hard for the audience to believe that she felt threatened by me. Really? Was this guy for real? Dorothy and the witch don't do hand-to-hand combat. The witch has superpowers. She flies on a broom and casts spells. Did he even understand what a witch was? Why was this guy directing when he had absolutely no vision and zero understanding of the material? I was so upset that I wrote my father a letter in England, and I told him that camp was a cruel and unjust place, and that in protest I was going on a hunger strike. I mailed the letter on my way to the mess hall, where upon seeing that we were having macaroni and cheese for dinner, I promptly forgot all about my hunger strike. The next day, the director had an epiphany. He told me that I seemed to have a lot of passion for the role, so he was going to create a new part, the Wicked Witch's little cousin who was visiting Oz for the weekend. I'm thinking of calling her the Little Witch of the South. Can you do a Southern accent? Can I do a Southern accent? All right, then, it's settled. You'll be the Wicked Witch's little sidekick. And I'll be in every scene with the witch. He rolled his eyes and agreed with a sigh, but whatever. My star was rising and all was right with the world again. Until, late one night, I heard a voice burst into the counselor's room of the cabin. "Where's Jennifer? Is she okay? Is she in the hospital?" It was my father, straight off a plane from England. I held my hands over my mouth in horror, remembering that letter. My counselor, Mary, asked, "Why wouldn't she be okay?" My father told her about my hunger strike, and Mary laughed and assured her that I hadn't skipped a single snack, let alone a meal. I heard him drop what I soon learned were grocery bags filled with Life cereal and jars of Jif peanut butter. So my father, who could figure out how to make an international phone call while on LSD, never once considered calling the camp before taking a 6-hour flight home and then stopping at the grocery store. I walked into the counselor's cabin. My father saw me and said, "Well, look who's awake. It's Gandhi." That was quite a scene you made over not being cast as a witch. Oh, right. I actually am a witch now. Are you mad? He pondered for a moment and then shrugged. "No, baby, I guess it was just time for me to come home." I went on to play the Little Witch of the South at the end of the summer, and the Wicked Witch of the West and I wreaked havoc on Oz. We flew around casting evil spells. We conjured up a poppy field that knocked Dorothy out cold. And then we locked her up in our castle, turned over a sand timer, and told her that when that red sand ran out, she was dead. We were fierce. In the end, the Wicked Witch of the West and I were killed by a bucket of water. But we went down in a mad, cackling splash of glory. We went down fighting. And there was something powerful about that. As much as I loved my time on stage in The Wizard of Oz, the real magic for me that summer wasn't the show itself. It was learning that I had the power to create a new role for myself and change the script. I didn't need a broom. I didn't need ruby slippers. I just needed to realize that although I was small, my voice didn't have to be. I just needed to speak up, speak loudly, and demand to be heard. Thank you.
Jennifer Coburn, everybody. Let's hear it for Jennifer Coburn.